Welcome to True Crime Case Files, where we delve into the most shocking and perplexing crimes from across the country. Today, we take you to Norman, Oklahoma, a seemingly quiet, conservative suburb. But behind closed doors, one woman's secret life led to a grisly murder that left the entire community reeling. This is the story of a devoted housewife, whose hidden affair with a neighbor's teenage daughter ended in a tragic and violent death. Helen Marquardt was 42 years old, and the picture of a perfect Southern homemaker. She lived in Norman, Oklahoma, a quiet suburb known for its conservative values and close-knit community. Her life seemed like something out of a family sitcom: a beautiful home, a loving husband, and three lively triplets, Ryder, Rifle, and Ryan. Helen was heavily involved in the community, especially at her children's school. Her kindness and warm personality made her a beloved figure in the neighborhood. To the outside world, Helen seemed to have everything. Her husband, Robert Marquardt, was a successful corporate lawyer, known for his work helping major oil companies to find legal loopholes to drill for oil in third world countries. The family often attended church at First Baptist of Norman, where Helen led a Bible study group for women. They were the kind of family you'd expect to see on a Christmas card, smiling and picture perfect. But beneath the surface, Helen was struggling. Her marriage to Robert had grown cold and distant over the years. Robert's demanding job kept him away from home for weeks at a time, and when he was home, he was often preoccupied with work. The couple's once strong bond had weakened, leaving Helen feeling lonely and sexually unfulfilled. She began to crave excitement, something to break the monotony of her everyday life. In early 2022, Helen found that excitement in a most unexpected place: her 17-year-old neighbor, Taylor Ronsley. What started as a friendly mentorship, with Helen teaching Taylor how to, quote, act like a good Christian lady, soon turned into something much darker. Their relationship quickly escalated into a secret sexual affair, with Helen becoming increasingly obsessed with the young woman. She was captivated by Taylor's youth and energy, qualities that Helen felt she had lost over the years. This affair became Helen's escape, a way to fill the void left by her crumbling marriage. In the days leading up to her death, Helen's behavior became more erratic. She withdrew from her usual activities and became more possessive of Taylor. It was clear to those close to her that something was deeply wrong, but no one could have predicted the tragic end that was about to unfold. On the morning of June 5, 2022, Robert Marquardt walked into his home in Norman, Oklahoma, after a long overnight at the office. It was just after 7 a.m., and the sun was already shining brightly through the windows. The house was eerily quiet, which was unusual given that his three children, Ryder, Rifle, and Ryan, were normally up and getting ready for school. Robert expected to find his wife, Helen, bustling about the kitchen, making breakfast, but instead he found the kitchen empty. Robert called out for Helen, but there was no answer. As he climbed the stairs to their bedroom, a sense of unease began to settle in. When he reached the bedroom door, he noticed it was slightly ajar. Pushing it open, Robert was met with a scene that would haunt him forever. Helen was lying on the floor next to their bed, naked, with a pool of blood around her head. She had been shot to death. The room was a mess. The bed was unmade, furniture was overturned, and shards of broken glass were scattered across the floor. It was clear that a violent struggle had taken place. Robert stood frozen for a moment, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Then panic set in. He rushed to Helen's side, desperately trying to wake her, but it was too late. Realizing she was gone, Robert grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his hands shaking as he tried to explain to the operator what had happened. The 911 call was frantic. Robert's voice was barely controlled as he told the operator that his wife had been shot and that she wasn't breathing. The operator tried to keep him calm, but Robert was clearly in shock. When the police arrived a few minutes later, they found Robert sitting on the floor next to Helen's body, his face pale and his eyes wide with disbelief. He was taken outside and placed in a police car while the officers secured the scene. News of Helen's death quickly spread through the neighborhood. Neighbors who had seen the commotion began gathering outside the Marquardt home, whispering to one another as they tried to make sense of what had happened. It wasn't long before local news stations like KFOR-TV arrived on the scene, cameras rolling as they reported live from the quiet suburban street that had suddenly become the center of a grisly murder investigation. The Norman Police Department arrived at the Marquardt home within minutes of Robert's 911 call on June 5, 2022. Officer David Collins, a 12-year veteran known for his calm demeanor, was the first on the scene. He quickly assessed the situation and called for backup. The quiet suburban street was soon filled with police cars, their lights flashing red and blue, cutting through the early morning calm. Detective Dwayne Yoakum, a meticulous investigator with a reputation for solving complex cases, was assigned to lead the investigation. As the officers entered the home, they were met with a chaotic crime scene. The bedroom was in complete disarray. The bed was unmade, the mattress askew, and several pieces of furniture had been knocked over. The broken glass on the floor suggested a struggle had taken place. Helen Marquardt's lifeless body lay on the floor next to the bed, a gunshot wound to her head the apparent cause of death. Blood had pooled around her, staining the beige carpet a deep red. Detective Yoakum surveyed the scene with a practiced eye. She noticed the position of Helen's body and the nearby objects, making mental notes of everything. The scene told a story of desperation and violence. Helen's face showed signs of a struggle, with bruises visible on her arms and legs. The room's state indicated that Helen had fought hard against her attacker. The murder weapon, a small handgun, was found on the floor near Helen's body. It was quickly bagged as evidence, along with the shards of glass and several other items from the room. Forensic specialists, dressed in white coveralls, methodically combed through the bedroom, dusting for fingerprints and taking samples of the bloodstains. They photographed the entire scene, documenting every detail that could later be used in the investigation. Outside, Officer Collins interviewed Robert Marquardt, who was still in a state of shock. Robert explained that he had found Helen's body when he returned home from work early that morning. He insisted he had no idea who could have done this to his wife. As the questioning continued, Robert's answers were slow and disjointed, reflecting his disbelief and grief. Detective Yoakum, while sympathetic to Robert's emotional state, knew that time was of the essence. The first 48 hours after a murder were critical, and she was determined to gather as much evidence as possible before any leads went cold. The investigation was just beginning, but the scene in the Marquardt home had already provided several clues that would guide the detectives in their search for Helen's killer. Taylor Ronsley, the 17-year-old neighbor and the first suspect in the investigation, was well known around Norman, Oklahoma. She was a bright and independent young woman set to graduate from Norman High School that month. Taylor was popular among her peers, known for her rebellious streak in a town where conservative values often dictated behavior. Despite her vibrant exterior, Taylor's sexual relationship with Helen Marquardt had taken a dark turn. What began as a mentorship quickly escalated into a secret, passionate affair that left Taylor feeling increasingly trapped. Helen, who initially acted as a guide for Taylor in navigating the expectations of their community, soon became a possessive and controlling sexual partner, often asking Taylor to experiment far beyond her comfort zone. Taylor's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She had become more withdrawn, avoiding social gatherings and skipping her usual hangouts, like the local Starbucks where she and her friends would often meet. When Detective Dwayne Yoakum and her team brought Taylor in for questioning, they were particularly interested in her sexual relationship with Helen. The detectives knew that Helen's possessiveness could have been a possible motive for murder. Taylor's reaction during the interrogation was telling. She appeared nervous, fidgeting with her hands and avoiding eye contact. Detective Yoakum asked Taylor about the nature of her relationship with Helen, and at first, Taylor was reluctant to say much. However, as the questioning continued, she admitted that she and Helen had been involved in a romantic relationship that had recently soured. Taylor described how Helen had become increasingly erratic in the weeks leading up to her death. She mentioned how Helen would often call her at all hours of the day, demanding her to drop everything to have sex with her. Taylor also revealed that Helen had threatened to expose their relationship if Taylor tried to end it. These threats had caused Taylor a great deal of stress, and she had started to feel suffocated by Helen's constant need for control. When asked where she was the night of the murder, Taylor claimed she was at a friend's house, studying for final exams. The detectives noted her alibi but remained skeptical given the tension in her relationship with Helen. Taylor's nervous demeanor during the interrogation only heightened their suspicions. Detective Yoakum pressed her for more details, but Taylor maintained her innocence, insisting that she had nothing to do with Helen's death. Despite her denials, Taylor's connection to the victim and the strained nature of their relationship made her a key suspect in the investigation. The detectives knew they needed to dig deeper into Taylor's story to either confirm or rule out her involvement in the crime. The next person under scrutiny was Robert Marquardt, Helen's 46-year-old husband. As a corporate lawyer specializing in helping oil companies find loopholes to take people's land in third-world countries for drilling, Robert had a demanding career that often kept him away from home. He worked long hours, frequently traveling for business meetings and court appearances. In the close-knit community of Norman, he was known for his professional success, but also for his distant, somewhat aloof demeanor. Unlike Helen, who was actively involved in the community, Robert kept mostly to himself, focusing on his career and leaving Helen to manage their home and raise their three children, Ryder, Rifle, and Ryan. Robert's relationship with Helen had been strained for some time. The couple, once seen as the perfect pair, had grown apart over the years. Friends and neighbors noticed a shift. They no longer attended events together, and when they did, there was an obvious tension between them. Helen had confided in a few close friends that she felt neglected and lonely in her sexless marriage. She had mentioned how Robert's constant absences had made her feel more like a single parent than a partner in their relationship. On the night of Helen's murder, Robert claimed he had been working overnight at his office in downtown Oklahoma City. He told the detectives that he hadn't noticed anything unusual when he returned home early the next morning, only to find Helen's lifeless body. Detective Dwayne Yoakum and her team were interested in Robert's alibi and his reaction to finding his wife dead. They questioned him thoroughly, trying to gauge whether his grief was genuine or if it masked something darker. During the interrogation, Robert remained calm and composed, answering questions in a measured tone. He expressed deep sorrow over Helen's death, but there was a detachment in his demeanor that the detectives found unsettling. He admitted that he and Helen had been having marital problems, but insisted that he still loved her and would never have harmed her. However, the detectives couldn't ignore the possibility that Robert's strained marriage and Helen's affair with their neighbor's daughter, Killer Ronsley, could have provided a motive for murder. When pressed about his whereabouts on the night of the murder, Robert was adamant that he had been at work, presenting time-stamped emails and phone records as proof. While his alibi seemed solid, the detectives were not entirely convinced. They noted that Robert's profession gave him the skills and resources to potentially cover his tracks if he were involved in the crime. Despite his calm demeanor, Robert's strained marriage and the coldness in his relationship with Helen kept him firmly in the spotlight of the investigation. The detectives knew they had to keep a close eye on him as they continued to piece together the events leading up to Helen's death. The third suspect in the investigation was Karen Ronsley, Taylor's 42-year-old mother. Karen was a single mother who worked long hours as a nurse at Norman Regional Hospital. She was known for her dedication to her job, often working double shifts to make ends meet and provide for Taylor. Despite her busy schedule, Karen had a reputation for being a strong, no-nonsense woman who cared deeply for her daughter. Karen and Helen Marquardt had been friends for several years. Their friendship was initially built on shared experiences as mothers and homemakers. However, as time passed, Karen began to notice changes in her daughter's behavior. Taylor had become more secretive, and her once close relationship with her mother seemed to be slipping away. Karen suspected that something was going on between Taylor and Helen, but she wasn't sure what. A few days before Helen's murder, Karen confronted Helen about her suspicions. The two had a heated argument in Helen's driveway, where Karen demanded that Helen stop having sex with her daughter. Karen was protective of Taylor and didn't like the idea of her daughter being involved in anything that could harm her future. The confrontation left both women angry, and Karen left the encounter feeling uneasy. When Detective Dwayne Yoakum and her team brought Karen in for questioning, they were aware of the argument she had with Helen. The detectives asked Karen about her relationship with Helen and why she had confronted her. Karen, who was usually composed, showed signs of stress during the interrogation. She admitted that she had argued with Helen, but denied having anything to do with her death. She explained that she was concerned about Taylor's well-being and only wanted to protect her daughter from getting hurt. The detectives pressed Karen about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Karen stated that she had been working a night shift at the hospital and had clocked out just before midnight. She provided time-stamped records from the hospital's timekeeping system to support her alibi. Despite her strong alibi, the detectives couldn't ignore the intensity of the argument she'd had with Helen and the fact that she lived so close to the crime scene. Karen's protective nature and her proximity to the Marquardt home kept her on the detectives' radar. They continued to investigate her involvement, looking for any possible link between her argument with Helen and the events that led to Helen's murder. While Karen maintained her innocence, the detectives knew they couldn't rule her out just yet. The investigation into Helen's death was far from over, and Karen's role in the case remained a critical piece of the puzzle. On June 12, 2022, just as the summer heat began to settle over Norman, Oklahoma, a breakthrough in the case emerged. It was mid-morning, around 10 a.m., when Detective Dwayne Yoakum received a call from a technician at a local electronics repair shop, Tech Fix, located on Main Street. The technician had been working on a malfunctioning home security system brought in by a customer when he stumbled upon something unusual: several hidden video files stored within the system's memory. These files contained footage that had been recorded in the Marquardt home, specifically in the master bedroom where Helen Marquardt's body had been found. The technician, realizing the significance of what he had discovered, immediately contacted the police. Detective Yoakum and her team quickly arrived at Tech Fix to review the footage. The videos, which were dated over several months leading up to the murder, provided chilling evidence. The recordings revealed Helen engaging in a sex relationship with Taylor Ronsley. What was more disturbing, however, was that it became clear Helen had been the one secretly filming their sexual encounters, likely without Taylor's knowledge. The videos not only confirmed the illicit affair, but also showed the increasing tension between Helen and Taylor. In one of the final recordings, made just days before the murder, Helen could be heard threatening to expose their relationship if Taylor tried to leave her. The footage painted a picture of a sexual relationship that had turned toxic, with Helen growing more possessive and Taylor appearing increasingly fearful. This new evidence was a turning point in the investigation. The detectives realized that Helen's murder wasn't just a crime of passion. It was the tragic result of a relationship that had spiraled out of control. The footage also provided crucial insight into Taylor's state of mind leading up to the murder, suggesting that she may have acted out of fear and desperation. With this new evidence in hand, Detective Yoakum and her team returned to the Marquardt home to search for the hidden cameras that had captured the footage. They found several small, discreet devices placed around the bedroom, further confirming Helen's role in recording the videos. This discovery significantly shifted the direction of the investigation. The detectives now had a clearer understanding of the dynamics at play and began focusing more on Taylor's involvement, leading them closer to the truth about what happened on the night of Helen Marquardt's death. Hey, true crime case solvers interested in more real-life murder mysteries, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Stay safe, true crime case solvers. As the investigation reached its climax, all eyes were on Taylor Ronsley. The hidden footage discovered in Helen Marquardt's home provided the detectives with critical evidence that pointed directly to her. On June 14, 2022, Detective Dwayne Yoakum and her team finally felt they had enough to make an arrest. Taylor Ronsley, just 18 years old, was a popular high school senior who had once been full of promise. Known for her outgoing personality and academic achievements, Taylor was the kind of girl who seemed to have it all. But behind closed doors, she was trapped in a toxic and secretive sexual relationship with Helen, a relationship that had spiraled out of control. Taylor's once bright future had dimmed under the weight of Helen's controlling manipulation and possessiveness. On the night of Helen's murder, the tension between the two reached a breaking point. The hidden footage showed Helen threatening to reveal their sexual relationship via sex tapes she had recorded if Taylor ever tried to leave her. This threat was the final straw for Taylor, who felt cornered and terrified. In a moment of panic and desperation, Taylor grabbed the gun from Helen's nightstand and shot her. The crime scene, with its overturned furniture and broken glass, told the story of a fierce struggle that had ended in tragedy. Detective Yoakum, now confident in her case, moved quickly. At 3 p.m. on June 14, the police arrived at the Ronsley home. Taylor was inside, sitting on the living room couch with her mother, Karen. The officers calmly explained the situation and placed Taylor under arrest for the murder of Helen Marquardt. Taylor, visibly shaken, didn't resist. She seemed almost relieved, as if the weight of her secret was finally being lifted. Karen, on the other hand, was in shock. She had no idea that her daughter had been involved in such a dangerous relationship, and the reality of the situation left her speechless. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Helen's family, especially her husband Robert and their 3 children, were devastated by the news. Robert had suspected that something was wrong in his marriage, but he never imagined it would end in such a horrific way. The Marquardt family, once seen as the epitome of suburban success, was now shattered. In the days that followed, more details about the toxic sexual relationship between Helen and Taylor came to light, painting a complex picture of emotional abuse and desperation. The community, which had initially seen Taylor as a promising young woman, began to view her actions through a different lens, one that took into account the psychological torment she had endured. Taylor's arrest marked the beginning of a long legal process, one that would force everyone involved to confront the dark truths that had been hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect lives. The trial of Taylor Ronsley began in late November 2022, capturing the attention of the entire Norman, Oklahoma, community. The courtroom was packed with spectators and media, all eager to see how the case would unfold. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Mark Peters, a 50-year-old seasoned lawyer with a reputation for being tough but fair, argued that Taylor had committed cold-blooded murder. Peters painted a picture of Taylor as a manipulative young woman who, when faced with the possibility of losing control over her secret affair with Helen Marquardt, chose to end Helen's life rather than face the consequences. On the other side, Taylor's defense attorney, Lisa Green-Troller, a 38-year-old known for her passionate advocacy for young clients, took a different approach. Green-Troller argued that Taylor was a victim of Helen's emotional and psychological manipulation. She presented evidence from the hidden videos showing how Helen had increasingly pressured and threatened Taylor, driving her to the brink of despair. Green-Troller contended that Taylor's actions, while tragic, were the result of intense fear and a sense of having no way out. She pleaded with the jury to consider the torment Taylor had endured in the months leading up to the murder. The trial was emotionally charged, especially for Helen's family, who sat in the courtroom every day, listening to the details of Helen's secret life and the events that led to her death. Robert Marquardt, in particular, was visibly shaken as he heard testimony about his wife's affair and the manipulative behavior she had displayed toward Taylor. The triplets, too young to fully understand the proceedings, were kept away from the trial, their lives now forever changed by the loss of their mother. After several days of testimony and arguments, the jury reached a verdict. On November 29, 2022, Taylor Ronsley was found guilty of manslaughter, not murder. The jury, influenced by the evidence of Helen's manipulation and Taylor's psychological state, chose to convict her on a lesser charge. The judge sentenced Taylor to 10 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Helen's family felt the punishment was too lenient, struggling to reconcile the woman they knew with the secret life that had led to her death. Meanwhile, some in the community sympathized with Taylor, recognizing the difficult circumstances that had driven her to commit the crime. The trial's conclusion left many in Norman reflecting on the hidden struggles that can exist behind closed doors and the tragic consequences they can bring. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of everyone involved were profoundly changed. Taylor Ronsley began serving her sentence at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center, a women's prison in McLeod, Oklahoma. At just 18 years old, her life had taken a tragic turn. Inside prison, Taylor enrolled in counseling and educational programs, trying to rebuild her life from the ruins of what it had become. Her once bright future, full of promise, now seemed uncertain as she faced the consequences of her actions. Helen Marquardt's family struggled to move on from the tragedy that had torn their lives apart. Robert Marquardt, who had once been a successful corporate lawyer, found it difficult to return to his high-powered career. The revelation of his wife's secret affair and the circumstances surrounding her death had left him shattered. He took a leave of absence from his job, choosing instead to focus on raising his children, Ryder, Rifle, and Ryan. The triplets, just 9 years old, had lost their mother in the most horrific way. Robert did his best to shield them from the details of the case, but the emotional scars ran deep. Karen Ronsley, Taylor's mother, also faced an uphill battle. A dedicated nurse who had always worked long hours to provide for her daughter, Karen was consumed with guilt, wondering how she could have missed the signs of her daughter's distress. She continued to support Taylor throughout her incarceration, visiting her regularly and advocating for her early release. The Norman community, once close-knit and conservative, was left in shock by the events that had unfolded in their quiet suburb. Helen Marquardt's death and the trial that followed became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even in the most seemingly perfect neighborhoods, dark secrets could be lurking beneath the surface. Friends and neighbors who had once admired the Marquardt family now looked at their own lives, questioning what might be hidden behind their own closed doors. Life in Norman slowly returned to normal, but the memory of Helen's tragic death and the trial that followed would never fully fade. It served as a grim reminder of the hidden pain and desperation that can lead to unimaginable consequences.